Our Creator has been leading me to speak on the fruit from the goodly trees that we are to bring in with us into our temporary dwellings during His fall harvest feast. He keeps adding to the understanding of His desires that He wants for us to become our desires. He has tied this fruit in with the fruit that comes from the tree of life and with the branches that we are to become of the vine, which is His word or His logos. They are one and the same because His seven spirits flow into us through eating off of the tree of life, and they teach us His word, and we become branches of the vine. There is only one source of this goodly fruit, and it is Him who created us. He is the tree of majesty and glory and honor. He is the tree of righteousness. We are to become like trees of righteousness ourselves that have grown from the living water that comes from Him, and we are to help Him produce His fruit. His fruit are His children. They are what His word and His seven spirits produce. Those becoming His children are becoming His word as they are filled with His seven spirits, just as His Son became His word and as He was filled with His Father's seven spirits. It is an awesome transformation process that He has set before us. He is building a family, and He not only wants us to become His family, but He also wants us engaged in helping Him build His family. He wants us to take His truth to the world and to live it to be an example to the world. Some have asked me, what about those who have not heard the truth that would have set them free? What about them? Well, my question for each of you who asked this question is, what have you done to bring His truth to them? Or have you helped bring the lies to the world instead, like so many have? Many who ask this question are rejecting the truth themselves, and they even heard it. Most have heard it, have rejected it, and perverted it. They reject it because they have lent their ears to the badly trees or to the corrupt tree. This is exactly what this feast is designed to teach us not to do. We are not to bring in the fruit from the corrupt trees into our temporary dwellings. Just in case any of you who are listening to this video and have not listened to the rest of the videos on the Feast of Temporary Dwellings, the temporary huts that our Creator commands us to make for this feast are supposed to represent our bodies in the flesh. We are temporarily given life in the flesh to learn to become permanent spirit beings in His family. Our bodies are temporary dwellings. The rotten fruit that comes from the corrupt trees is all fruit that does not come from all of the fruit that does not come from the majestic tree of life. It is the fruit that comes out of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it produces corrupt trees instead of trees of righteousness. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil produces sin, and it produces these corrupt trees. And we are told what sin is in 1 John 3:4. Whosoever commits sin transgresses the law, or the Torah, because sin is transgression of the Torah. Line upon line, precept upon precept, this word that is translated into the English word law is easy to determine that John is speaking about the Torah in this verse. And line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, it is easy to determine that our Creator's Torah is His overall path that includes His commandments, statutes, judgments, and ordinances and precepts. Understanding what the Torah was given to us to accomplish in us shows why transgressing it is the definition for sin. When Adam and Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Elohim said to them, "Look, man has decided to become like me by deciding right from wrong for themselves." He was saying that they had lifted themselves up to be Him in their hearts. This is, of course, the same thing that Satan did. It was their rebellion to His word that led them astray. They chose to listen to a different voice other than their Creator's voice. They denied His word, and they were shut off from the tree of life, which is the goodly tree that would have yielded them to become like the tree of righteousness that it represents. We must not decide right from wrong for ourselves. He is the master potter, not our own ideas of what is right or wrong. He tells us what is right and what is wrong if we will hearken to Him. His word is to be our sole source for all instructions. Yeshua told us that we can recognize the corrupt trees by their fruit. He said that their fruit is lawlessness. It is lawless hearts that have perverted His words to say that He said something different. The translators call it iniquity, and the word is lawlessness. He said that it does not matter if you call him Lord, or if you do many wonderful deeds in his name, or if you cast out demons in his name, or if you preach or prophesy in his name, or all of the above. He says that none of this will matter if you also practice lawlessness, or in other words, if you ignore his Father's Torah. In the following verses in Matthew 7, he ties in his Father's logos, or his word, with the lawlessness and the bad fruit to drive the point home. This is the old garbage in, garbage out concept. If you put garbage into your mind, your life is going to reflect garbage, and your thoughts will reflect garbage. The garbage is lawlessness, and it is deciding right from wrong for ourselves instead of allowing our Creator to tell us how it is. His word that we are to live off of is what his goodly fruit is built from. Part of this is he wants us bringing ourselves into our temporary dwellings as goodly fruit, and this is what we must rejoice in. Explain further here as we go on. It is a measuring process that is part of preparing for the final exam. When we stand before the judgment seat and are measured by his word, his logos, that Yeshua said all will be measured by. And it's from the same measuring rod that the temple, the 144,000, were built with. If we are only feeding off of the goodly tree, we are becoming fruit of this tree. One thing that I did not go into yesterday is the question, what are we to do with our increase that he told us to set aside to bring to his feast to rejoice in? Well, what does his word tell us to do? He has already explained that it is a test, so we must be instructed by the examiner in order to pass the test. Toward the end of yesterday's video, I read a verse about circumcising the foreskins of our hearts. It is a paradigm shift, or a reprogramming of our minds to be in agreement with his thoughts, and that he wants us to choose over our own desires of the flesh. He wants our desires to be in agreement with his. Here is what he tells us to do with the increase that we bring to his set-apart feast. He says, and there you shall eat before Yahweh Elohim, and you shall rejoice in all that you put your hand to, you and your household wherein Yahweh Elohim has blessed you. In this day everyone shall not do all that is right to do in our own eyes in this place. But he also said later in the same text that we are to purchase whatsoever our soul desires. So which is it? Like he has led me to say, it is a test. He openly told us that our journey is to test us and to prove us, to see if we would love him with our entirety of life. And here he told us that we are not to look to do what is right in our own eyes. So it's pretty obviously here what he's trying to say. Our desires are to become his. But when people hear whatsoever your soul desires, they choose to ignore these other instructions because there is no fear in their hearts. They pick and choose what to hear so that they can do their own thing and worship him how they see fit. Cling to the desires of their hearts. The test is our desires are not to be what is right in our own eyes. Our desires are to become what is right in his eyes, and then our desires are passing the test. This goes all the way back to the two trees in the garden, the fruit of the tree of life and the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's the same test. If our desires are to becoming what is right in his eyes, then we are coming before him as goodly fruit. In the flesh, we are still a work in process, learning to become as he is, so it is what we bring into our temporary dwellings that makes us to be like the tree of righteousness or not. In order to learn to become as he is, we must not do what is right in our own eyes. This is the corrupt tree, the fruit from the corrupt tree. And to do so, and the corrupt tree produces corrupt fruit. And the corrupt fruit produces more corrupt trees that will be cut down and thrown into the fire. Deciding right from wrong for ourselves is sin. It is lawlessness. In his instructions with what to do with the increase that we are to set aside, he repeats over and over again to take heed not to forget the Levites. The Levites were those who he set apart to do his work. In verse 28 of this chapter, he also tells us to do what is good and right in his eyes. He keeps on filling in the gaps through these instructions, here a little, there a little. When you really think about it, how could they eat all of the increase in 7 days that came from his mighty blessings anyway? Or for that matter, if you add up the other feast, if you go to the 7 days of unleavened bread and the feast of first fruits, it wouldn't be possible. They could not, no matter how much they feasted. So we have to ask him what his desire is besides taking care of the Levites. And he tells us. I'm going to refer back to the instructions that he gave us for the special Day of Atonement that was last week. He showed us how Isaiah prophesied for a specific Day of Atonement in chapter 58, and I spoke on this, and how this specific Day of Atonement was this year. I marvel at how he keeps adding to this as he continues to restore his truth that was desolated in the hearts of men. Part of his correction for Israel at this time, he spoke of in verse 7, Isaiah 58, he says, "You have not divided your bread to the hungry, and you mistreat the lowly that come to your house, because you hide your eyes when you see the naked, and you do not cover his flesh. Now break open as the morning light, and hurry to be made whole, and bring forth righteousness as he gathers the splendor of Yahweh." He is sending his son to gather his splendor, those who have become like trees of righteousness. This is exciting. In this admonition he gave here in verse 7, he said that Israel has not fed and clothed the poor and the needy like they were supposed to. They hid their eyes from them. And like he has had me speak so many times, we did not take the truth to the world like we were supposed to either. Instead, Israel took lies to them, and that would not heal the nations. Yes, some groups did bring aid to some of the poor and the needy to feel good about themselves, but they did this in vain because they accompanied their aid with lies and not the truth that would have healed the nations. They did not bring them the unleavened bread of life. Their results prove this. Poverty and pestilences continue to flourish in the world. He ties all of this in with crying aloud and sparing not at this time, and he says that the hungry will finally obtain. In the following verses, he has told those who will return to him to offer up an offering of righteousness to him at this time by sounding the alarm and crying aloud to warn the people to turn to him. He has wanted us helping the poor and giving to our brethren that are in need. We are to be our brother's keeper, not just spiritually, but physically as well. We are commanded to not turn our hands from helping those in need. Instead, greed and selfishness flourished in our midst. He said in Deuteronomy 15, verse 11, "Because the poor will never cease out of the land, therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand wide to your brother, and to the poor, and to the needy in the land." A few verses earlier in verse 4, he said that it is because the poor would not cease to be is the reason why he would bless them so much. The poor and the needy are part of the test. He told us to not harden our hearts about releasing their debts, but we were to give freely. But now it is too late to feed the world. Yes, we must still give freely to those in need, but now he is also telling us to cry aloud and to spare not. And he is going to feed the world. I'm not sure how it happened back then, but they were obviously commanded to bring their increase to these 3 feasts and to rejoice with it. I imagine that many took these verses like most do today and failed the test, while others looked into the spiritual intent and shared their abundance with those in need. This group rejoices in the giving, and this is our Creator's desire for us. It's a desire for us to have this same desire. Imagine how his truth would have been received by the world, and how it would have been spread if those spreading it fed and nurtured the world with his blessings. It is all part of the paradigm shift, and it all is his anyway, and it's all from him anyway. People say that America has fed the world. Give me a break. They pay their farmers to not produce food so that they can keep prices up because of their greed. And the amount of food and everything's thrown away in America too is unbelievable, and even other scattered nations where Israel primarily are gathered. Like I said, there have been some groups or individuals that have helped others in order to feel good about themselves, but that needs to be seen for what it is. And there are some who have given freely and tried to spread the truth and have lived it, but this was a very, very small flock over time. Most have most that have done humanitarian type of aid did so to feel good about themselves and not to help our Creator build his family. Or they thought they were helping him build his family by taking Satan's lies and with their works to the world, because they had no fear of being wrong with their Creator, so they didn't take the truth. They bought into all of Satan's lies out of just their itching ears and feel good about how they claimed to worship him, and spoke about that in other videos. In any case, the truth has not been lived by very many because it has been rejected by nearly everyone who has heard it, and it did not go out to the world. And it would have healed the world, and it's going to heal the world. Now it will go out into the world, and the poor and the hungry will be fed. The world needs to know that he has raised up a prophet to restore truth, so that they will know where to find the truth, so that they must return to. Soon the floodgates of his wrath will be opened, and who is crying out to warn the people? There are so few who are. But sadly, there are many who are crying out to warn people, but they are pointing them to lies that will not deliver them. This is no different than the humanitarians and the missionaries that have brought food and other needs to the different parts of the world, but in their own name. What good is it to bring someone food if you're going to also give them the spiritual food that will lead them to the lake of fire? We must cry out in the name of Yahweh Elohim, and cry out in no other version of Elohim besides him. Only he and those who are in agreement with him are just and true. The Feast of Temporary Dwellings was given to us to help keep us on track. It is part of the measuring rod. Instead, man gave it a new name, the Feast of Tabernacles, and they made it a party of the lust of their hearts and their heart's desires, and a party of eating off of the lies of men that did not instruct them to live by our Creator's every word. Most did not use it to undergo the paradigm shift to desire to learn what was right in their Creator's eyes, as it was designed to do. I marveled when I was in the enemy camps how even the so-called elders in this organization tried to correct me for my desire to help the needy. They would tell me how these people are just here to take advantage, etc. No, our Creator said that he put him here to test us and to prove our heart's desires. He put them here to refine us and to purify us. Would we feed them because he said so and let him transform our hearts so that we desire the same thing as he desired? Or would we do what was right in our own eyes so that we could lust off of the increase of our labors that came from him anyway? Man has failed the test miserably, at least most have, and now it is time for them to be recompensed. But he would rather you turn from your stiff-necked ways and let him circumcise your hearts. Some organizations or individuals try to dance around this responsibility that our Creator gave us by pointing out that there was a third tithe at every 3 years for the poor and the needy. Some of these organizations subsequently claim that the government is now responsible for the poor and the needy because we pay more than a third tithe in taxes anyway. They are liars and hypocrites. Yes, there was an additional tithe every 3 years that was to go to the Levites to distribute to those in need. And there still would be if the Levitical system was intact, but it's not. And even if it was, this has nothing to do with his other commandments for us to open our hands freely and to those in need. This third year tithe was not a replacement for his instructions to help those in need. It was actually for the fatherless and the widows and such. It is a stiff-necked and rebellious heart to ignore these other instructions to open our hands wide. It is a stiff-necked and obstinate heart that does what is right in their own eyes and decides right and wrong for themselves. It is a stiff-necked and rebellious heart to not seek for our Creator's desires to replace our desires. And those in need and the Levites are part of our Creator's test. The Feast of Temporary Dwellings is a place that we are to examine our hearts to see if we have been eating off of the goodly fruit or off of the badly fruit. And our heart's desires reflect what we have eaten off of. If we are eating off of the goodly fruit, we are rejoicing in giving to others, because all that Yahweh Elohim has blessed us with. And we're rejoicing in those blessings with others. An exciting time. And we are rejoicing in Him and His Son, because blessed is the one who is bearing the name of Elohim and His Son. It is a delight to be in them and them in us. The fruit from the goodly trees is most certainly the abundant life indeed. And the fruit from the corrupt tree is certainly rotten, and rotten yields a rotten stench indeed.